prowess are gifts of God. And the Spirit entering them makes all the difference. Verse 34, and we see it with Jesus. At the time of the baptism, the Spirit of God descends dove-like on Christ, and it drives him out into the wilderness. And because of the power of the Spirit in him, he can contend with Satan in the wilderness, and then can do all these marvelous, miraculous acts. And it's very clear, especially in Luke's gospel, it isn't Jesus, it's the Spirit in him. He's just a vessel for the Spirit. And he says, if it is by the Spirit of God that I drive out demons. So he always gives credit to the Spirit. Verse 34, but the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon, made him another man. And he sounded the trumpet. He calls out his tribal army. And his family group is called out to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh. That's the tribal area of Manasseh. And they too were called out to follow him. He sent messengers to the tribe of Asher, and to Zebulun too, and Naphtali, 4 tribes. And they came out to fight with him. So he must have been given some kind of great gift of eloquence or power or authority, that these people all came out and said, you're our general. Verse 36, before the world, Gideon is a mighty man of valor. So self-secure and so convinced of his own might, or God's might in him, that he gets all these tribes to come out and honor him as their leader. But in himself, within himself, he's still the little guy who was the least of his tribe, and everyone made fun of him. And he's wondering, is this really going to work? And so, verse 36, he wants another test. And we're going to see in this test that he isn't exactly the brightest guy in town. Verse 36, Gideon said to God, now these people think I'm so powerful and I have such self-confidence. I really don't. If thou wilt deliver Israel by my hand, as thou hast said, he's throwing God's words right back into his face. Behold, I'm laying, this is a test, God. Pass the test to convince me. Behold, I'm laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. Now the threshing floor would have been hard-packed earth. He takes this lamb's skin, which as we know is extremely absorbent. If there is dew on the fleece, now next morning in Israel, every morning dew appears on the ground. It's wet. If there is dew on the fleece tomorrow morning, and it is dry on the ground, then I will know that you will deliver Israel by my hand, as thou hast said. Well, of course, it was so the next morning, because the ground, whatever dew falls on the ground is going to be immediately absorbed, but the fleece becomes heavy with the moisture. So the ground is dry and the fleece is wet. He rose up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl with water. And then he says, wait a minute, that was a stupid test. Of course that's what happened. Well, I better come up with it. I better reverse the test. That'll do it. Then God will prove himself. And verse 39, he said to God, replay. Let not thy anger burn against me, God. I know you did what I asked you, but what I asked you was stupid. Let me speak but this once. It's Abraham. He's quoting Abraham. Let me make trial only this once, one more time. And God must say, we already did it. All right. Let the fleece be dry, and let the ground be wet. Now that's a good one. And God said, okay, that's what you want. And God did so that night. It was dry on the fleece only, and on the ground there was dew. Now there's a minor miracle, but it certainly is. It violates any natural understanding. But of course in the Bible, there's no such thing as nature. God's in control of everything. He wants the fleece to be wet, it's wet. He wants it to be dry, it's dry. Chapter 7. Now Gideon is convinced. But God isn't convinced that Gideon really understands. They're talking past each other frequently. It's really cute. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, if you forgot his name, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod, chapter 7. And the camp of Midian was north of them, by the hill of Moreh in the valley. So they are by the spring of Harod, and then in the valley, coming down from the mountains, there is where Midian has encamped. Not the brightest place to encamp in a valley. You don't have the high ground. So Gideon may be not the brightest guy, but neither are the Midianites. Verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, so Gideon goes to him and he says, look, God, I really assembled a big army, little me. I assembled 22,000 men. Pretty good. I did what you told me. And God says, too many. Too many? You know the effort I made to get these guys together? Call out all these tribes? These tribes don't cooperate. I made them do it. You should congratulate me. Too many? Aren't you ever satisfied? The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into your hand. Because if I lead 22,000 men, if you lead 22,000 men against the Midianites, everyone will say, well, the Israelites are such great soldiers. They must have done it themselves. And I won't get credit, and God won't get the glory. They have to understand that man does not lean on himself, but on God. And even if you go out and have a great successful life, it's because God gave you the strength to do it, and he blessed you. You've got to remember that. That's the key to self-transcendence, to reach beyond your own ego, to me. So I can't give you victory with 22,000 men. You're going to take credit for it and forget me. Now, therefore, go to your army, Gideon, and say to the soldiers, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home. One has to interpret this. Why are those people sent home? Are they the worst soldiers or the best soldiers? I would say that a soldier who's facing an overwhelming enemy the night before isn't fearful. He's not very realistic. I think it's the better soldiers who admit that they're frightened who go home. Who wouldn't? I mean, my uncle was a general in the Marine Corps, but he started as a private. And he said on D-Day, when they were ready to storm those beaches, he was terrified. He did it. They all did it. And they began to take Europe back from the Hun. But they were any fool. You have to be a fool not to be frightened. So he sends home, I think, probably the best soldiers. In any case, he sends home most of them. Gideon tested them. 22,000 returned and 10,000 remained. So actually, he had an army of 32,000, 22,000 go home. 2/3 of the army goes home. They admit they're frightened. Only the total blowhards who won't admit it, they're the ones who stay. Verse 4. And the Lord said to Gideon, so Gideon says, well, I got rid of 2/3 of the army. You happy now? Let's have the battle. No, there's still too many. And Gideon must say, what does this God want? Now, I want you to do this, Gideon. Take them down to the water, and I will test them. Well, Gideon had twice tested God. Now God's returning the favor. Now I'm going to test you. Take them down to the spring, to the river. And
There's just a little spring, because we were there.
Yep. And he of whom I say to you, this man shall go with you, shall go with you. And any of whom I say, this man shall not go with you, shall not go. But how do we divide them? So he brought the people down to the water, his whole 10,000 men in the army. And the Lord said to Gideon, every one tell them to drink, and watch how they drink. Some of them will lap the water with their tongues, as a dog laps. In other words, they will lie down flat, put their heads in the water, and lap the water. I had a dog that used to do that. I would take him in great walks through New York City, and he'd come back really tired out. And my mother had silk wallpaper in the foyer of the house. And this dog was a boxer, and they drool. And he would come in and shake his head, and the drool would go all over the place. She was constantly replacing that wallpaper. But then he'd go into the kitchen, and I'd give him a big bowl of cold water, and he was so lazy, he wouldn't even bother drinking. He just put his head in the water and open his mouth and let the water flow in. And he used to stick his legs out the back. Not like this, like an ordinary dog, but like a chicken. So he was delightful. But that's the way he drinks the water. I used to take him down to 86th Street and Lexington Avenue, where there was a hot dog stand. And it said, our hot dogs are better than steak, the finest hot dogs in the world. And I would buy him a hot dog. I'd never get one for myself. I just feed it to the dog. And finally, the man who ran the hot dog stand came out from behind the counter and he said, do you think I'm running a kennel here? You come in every night, you buy a hot dog for your dog, you don't eat my hot dogs. I said, well, I don't care much for hot dogs. And he said, kindly take your trade elsewhere. This isn't a dog station. Well, so after that, I had to go tie the dog up the block and then come down, get a hot dog and bring it to him. All right. I used to buy him ice cream in Central Park. He was a wonderful dog. All right, where were we? So, those who lap the water with their tongues, set them apart. And the others who kneel down to drink, set them apart. Verse 6. And the number of those that lapped the water, putting their hands to their mouths, with 300 men, but all the rest of the people knelt down to drink water. And the Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will deliver you. Now, I'm not sure how to picture this and how God makes the decision. But if they are lapping the water by lying down flat and putting their head in the water and drinking that way, they're not as smart as the people who go down on one knee with their spear in their hand and go like this with the water. It's the smarter ones that are sent home. Now why is it smarter? Because right across the valley are the Midianites. And if you're flat in your belly with your face in the water, they could attack you and you wouldn't notice till it's too late. But if you're very careful, down on one knee, bringing the water up to your face and looking around, you're a better soldier. Those are the ones who go home. It's only with the idiots who lay flat down and lap the water. They are those. So he's chosen the most incompetent possible army, and to show that God is the deliverer. Yes, sir.
I heard that the ones he sent home were in the position because that's how they worship idols.
Interesting. That's a rabbinic commentary which has nothing to do whatever with this text. What the medieval rabbis, what the hash they made of this, well. Oh God, this is being recorded. Sorry. All right. Any Orthodox rabbi who sees this, I'll be excommunicated. All right. So now he's got 300 nincompoops, led by a nincompoop. Verse 7. No, we did that. Verse 8. Now, after they went home, he collects jars and trumpets and retained 300 men, and that's all. Verse 9. Now, that same night, the Lord said to Gideon, all right, you're still unsure of yourself. I want you to act as a spy and go down the mountainside into the camp of the Midianites by night. Hide yourself and listen to the way the Midianite soldiers are talking to each other to get a feel of where they are psychologically and whether they're ready to be defeated or not. Verse 9, arise, go down against the camp of the Midianites, for I have given it into your hand. Now I tell you, I've already delivered them to you, but I want to prove it to you. If you fear to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you will hear what the Midianites are saying to each other. And when you do, your hand will be strengthened. You won't fear anymore that you might be defeated. And in the middle of verse 11, he went down with Purah his servant to the outskirts of the Midianite camp. And all of them, in verse 12, are in the valley like locusts for multitude. Their camels were without number. This is an enormous army, and he has 300 men. That's all. Verse 13. When Gideon snuck up to listen to the conversation between two of the Midianite guards, when Gideon came, behold, one Midianite man was telling a dream to his comrade. And he said, behold, I dreamed a dream. And lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. By the way, I dreamed a dream. Chalamti chalom is what Pharaoh said about his dreams. So, and then of course, Abraham argued with God the way Gideon did. This is a pastiche of earlier quotes from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses. This story is put together with all kinds of quotes, the way the Book of Mormon is, they're taking constant quotes from the Bible. I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian, and came to the tent, and struck it so that it fell. The tent represents the power of Midian. The barley bread, just a cake of bread, came down and knocked over the tent, turned it upside down, and the tent lay flat. And his companion says, I can interpret that dream. This is no other. That loaf of bread is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, who we hear is leading the Israelites across the hill. A man of Israel. And it means, the dream means, into his hand God has given Midian and all the host. So these people were defeated before the Israelites struck a blow. God had said he would panic them, and he does. Same thing as the Canaanites in the book of Joshua. Verse 15. When Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, he worshiped God. Oh God, you've done it. You've given us victory before we strike a blow. And he returned to the camp of Israel and said, arise, for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand. But he divided the 300 men into 3 companies. Notice what they don't have. They have trumpets, empty jars, and torches. What don't they have? Well, weapons. He's finally with the program. We don't need weapons. God will miraculously give us this victory. Because if we were acting without God, all the weapons in the world couldn't make 300 men defeat an army that's described as a locust plague or as many as the sands of the sea. But it's God's hand. So he divided the 300 men into 3 companies of 100 apiece. He put trumpets into the hands of all of them. And of all things, empty jars with torches inside the jars. So at a crucial moment, they're going to smash the jars, and the Midianites will look around. Now, you've seen those Western movies where General Custer leads his men into the valley, and he thinks there are only a few Indians, and then they look around, and they see on the ridge all around them, Indians, Indians, Indians. That's what the Midianites are going to see. Torches. It's in the middle of the night. It's a night attack. They're not ready for it. They're sleeping. And they look around, they hear smashing of jars, and they look around and there are torches all around. So 300 men look like 3 million. And he said to them, look at me, and do likewise. Whatever I do, says Gideon, you all do. When I come to the outskirts of the camp, do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, you blow your trumpets on every side of the camp, so the din will terrify them. And shout. And what shall you shout? For the Lord and for Gideon. The way the Israelites shouted when they marched around Jericho. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, at midnight. When they had just set the watch, the Midianites are expecting nothing. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars, holding in their left hands the torches, in their right hands the trumpets to blow, and they cried, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. They stood every man in his place round about the camp, on the ridge all around. And all the army ran. The Midianites ran. They're panicked. They see the torches, they hear the trumpets, the shouting, they don't know what's happened. They cried out and fled. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow. The Midianites in their panic begin to stab each other in their eagerness to get away. They don't know who the enemy is. The enemy is, the Israelites are still on the ridge. And against all the army, and the army fled. And they keep going. Verse 23, and the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. An enormous, miraculous victory in the middle of the night, 300 men, and not very good men, against a vast army. God can do what God wants to do. Now, there's a lot of stuff which I don't want to get into, Gideon arguing with the other tribes and everybody fighting among themselves. But then let's skip to chapter 8, verse 22. If you want to read the interim stuff yourself, you can. It's really hardly comprehensible. Chapter 8, verse 22. So, Gideon has led them in this great victory. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us out of the hand of Midian." This is a crucial paragraph. They're saying, "Be our king." And Gideon answers them. He may not be too bright, but he now realizes the power of God and his own limitations. They may give him credit for the victory, but he knows it goes to God. Gideon said to them, and this sums up the theology and the political philosophy of the entire period from 1250 BC until 1120 BC. "I will not rule over you," verse 23, "and my son will not rule over you, because the Lord rules over you." God is king, and to have a human king would be to insult God and show a lack of faith in God. And I'm not going to do that, because I know God gave us the victory, and we'll only keep having victories if we recognize we are a nation, we Israelites, but we're a unique nation. We're not a political nation. We are a spiritual people, and God Almighty is our king. That's what makes us unique. And Gideon said to them, "All right, I won't be king, but I have a request to make." And this shows his weakness. "Give me all of the gold jewelry that apparently they had taken from the Midianites when the Midianites fled the camp." Earrings. Men wore gold earrings in those days. And they take all this gold, and they get an enormous amount of gold, 1,700 shekels of gold. And verse 27, Gideon made an ephod of it. Now, an ephod is usually a breastplate, but it could also be a statue of some kind. So Gideon believes in God, but he lives in a pagan environment, and he doesn't know enough not to do that. The danger of doing that, of having any image of God or anything to represent God, is that you end up worshiping the symbol and forget it's simply a symbol. In the Roman Catholic religion, I'm sure there's simple-minded people who kneel in front of a statue of Mary and they think they're worshiping a stone statue. But the Catholic who understands his religion knows it's not, that's just a stone image. Mary, the Queen of Heaven, he's in heaven with God, Catholics believe, and that statue represents her. It isn't holy in itself at all. But the danger with religious symbols is you make the symbol absolute and you forget that it's just a reference to something higher. The Buddhists say Buddhism is a finger pointed toward the moon. It's not the moon. People confuse it with the moon. So that's the danger of religions that have a lot of symbols. You end up worshiping the symbol. And that's what happened here. And this ephod, whatever it was, some kind of an image, it says Israel played the harlot after that ephod. It became a snare to Gideon and to his family. He made a big mistake. He was right not to be king, but he made a big mistake in making this symbol of God, and people began worshiping it for itself. Remember, Moses made a bronze serpent. And later, when there was a reform in the religion, the king destroyed it. How can you destroy a sculpture made by the great Moses? Well, people had begun to worship it. That was the tendency. So they smashed it. Verse 28. So with all the internal problems of the ephod and the rest, verse 28, so Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they lifted up their heads no more. And the land had rest for 40 years in the days of Gideon. The fact that 40 is repeated over and over doesn't mean it's necessarily literal. After all, the flood of Noah was 40 days, 40 nights. Jesus was contending with Satan for 40 days and 40 nights. The Israelite people were in the desert for 40 years. Moses, 40 days and 40 nights. Over and over again, it says in this book, the land had rest for 40 years. The number 40 means an extended period in which some spiritual development took place. So that's what it really means. I wouldn't take it literally. It means a long time. Gideon won a great deal of peace. Well, I did a eulogy for Generalissimo Franco, who defeated the communists in the 1930s in Spain. And I said he brought 40 years of peace to his country. That was his great gift. And then when he died, the country became a democracy. But they needed the 40 years to pull themselves together. All right. Verse 29. Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, dwelt in his own house. He turned down the kingship. He had 70 sons, his own offspring, for he had many wives. I would think so. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, and he called his name Abimelech. That means my father is king. Avi, my father, Melech is king. Now why he take that name, I don't know, because his father Gideon had turned down the kingship. But it's a common name in the Bible. And Gideon died, verse 32, in a good old age, and he was buried in his father's tomb. All right. So now we're on to the next generation of Gideon's family, the next judge, Abimelech. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and played the harlot after the Baals, the same backsliding, and made Baal Berit their god. Berit means covenant, covenant Baal, the god, the Baal of the covenant. And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show kindness to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, either, which they should have for all the good he did them. And now the story goes back to the next generation. So they're backsliding, they're forgetting God's blessings, and now chapter 9. The next judge, Abimelech. This is a bad judge. Now Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem. Now that was Abraham's city. It's a big city in the north of Israel, important in Jewish history. To his mother's kinsmen, and said to them and to the whole clan of his mother's family, say in the ears of the citizens of Shechem, go to the elders of Shechem and say to them, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal rule over you, or that one rule over you? So he's a would-be king. He wants to say being run by one man is better than having some kind of a council rule you. And of course that king's going to be me. Remember also that I am your bone and your flesh. Well, all of the brothers are. And his mother's kinsmen spoke all these words on his behalf in the ears of all the men of Shechem, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, a strong man, a man coming to rescue everyone. Donald Trump. And people say, well, maybe he can solve our problems. Fools. And they say, he's our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal Berit, out of the temple of the pagan god. And Abimelech used that silver to hire worthless and reckless fellows, a bunch of bums who followed him. And he went to his father's house at Ophrah and slew his brothers. Now look, he's got to get rid of the 70 brothers if he's going to be the king. They are possible rivals. Kings often do this, wipe out brothers, cousins. He went to his father's house at Ophrah and slew his brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men, upon one stone. He kills them. Remember the stone, an important symbol. He'll get his by means of a stone. He kills 70 of his brothers, a horrible atrocity. But Jotham, the youngest of the brother, hid himself and escaped. And all the citizens of Shechem came together, and they went and made Abimelech king. He just murdered 70 of his brothers. They don't care. They made him king. And by the oak of the pillar at Shechem, which is a pagan shrine. Boy, have they gone wrong. And when it was told to Jotham, this young boy, who's the youngest of the 70 brothers who escaped, he went out and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim. We've seen that before, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, the blessing and the curse at the time of Joshua. And he cried aloud and said to them, so there's a meeting of all the elders of Shechem, and he speaks to them. They're there for a covenant renewal ceremony, apparently, at Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And this boy gets up. And he says, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. I'll tell you a fable. The trees once went to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, shall I leave my fatness by which gods and men are honored, and go to sway over the trees? I don't want to be king of the trees. I'm an olive tree, and I produce olive oil, and that's a rich thing and a wonderful thing. And the trees said, okay, you don't want to be king? And then they went to the fig tree in verse 10. Come you and reign over us. But the fig tree said, shall I leave my sweetness and my good fruit and go to sway over the trees? He turns it down. And the trees said to the vine, they're getting smaller and smaller, come you and reign over us. But the vine said to them, shall I leave my wine, which cheers gods and men, and go to sway over the trees? I don't want to be king. I'm content with what I have. Then all the trees said to the bramble, a thorn bush, come you and reign over us. And the bramble, in other words, Abimelech, said, if in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade, and I'll protect you, says Abimelech. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. If you turn on me, you elders of Shechem, I'll destroy you. But if you really want to give me power, all the good trees and bushes turned it down, but I, this thorny bramble, I take it. And they agree to it, and he becomes king. Verse 16, and the boy continues his parable. Now therefore, if you acted in good faith and honor when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved, for my father fought for you, and risked his life, and rescued you from the hands of Midian, and you have risen up against my father's house. You allowed 70 of his sons to be killed by this monster Abimelech, and you've slain his sons, 70 men on one stone, and have made Abimelech, this bum, the son of his maidservant, not even a legitimate son, king over the citizens of Shechem, because he is your kinsman. If you then have acted in good faith and honor with Jerubbaal, which obviously you haven't, and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the citizens of Shechem. I predict that you, fathers of Shechem, who should never have chosen this horrible man to be your king, and this monster, are going to fall out, and you're going to destroy each other. And Jotham ran away and fled for fear of Abimelech. But that's his prophecy, and now we're going to see it fulfilled. Verse 22. Abimelech ruled over Israel 3 years. It really means he ruled over his tribal territory for 3 years. And God sent an evil spirit, just as Jotham, this teenage kid who was prescient, who was a prophet, just as he said, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the violence done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might come and their